welcome everyone to the latest episode of the Motoring Millennials podcast. I'm Zach Rothenberger with Anthony Lucci, and we have a special guest returning for the second time. We didn't scare him away. Eric Peterka. Eric, how you doing?
Doing very well, Zach. Thanks for asking. How are you?
Good. Hey, before we get into our topic of, practicing with a purpose and going into some strategies and stuff, I mean, congrats on your top ET championship this year at US 131. How's it feel?
It feels awesome, man. It's funny. We talked in August or October of, I guess, last year. And, I talked about how I was sort of excited for what was to come. And, it's awesome what can happen in a year for sure. So, yeah, it was a really great experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I saw you were at the banquet. Did you have to give a speech?
Yes, I did. Yeah, it was, I've been waiting for that speech for a really long time. I've had a lot of years to think about what I was going to say in that speech.
Oh, I bet. No, that's fantastic. It couldn't have gone to a better person. So we're very happy for you, and we know big things are ahead still.
Thank you.
So bringing us into this week's episode of Practicing with a Purpose. I know, Eric, you're big with practicing and the practice tree, and kind of doing things even in the season and in the off season to make sure you're on your A game. So we want you to enlighten us. So show us your tricks.
Okay. So I guess before we get started, when I was a kid, I played drums, and I had a drumline instructor who told me a very important lesson, which was practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. And that's important here because there's a lot of sins you can commit that you can make a lot worse by practicing wrong when you're practicing on the practice tree. So it's important that you are trying to take as much as you can from what you do, or at least let me start out by saying I'm by no means like the best at the tree, but I did spend a lot of time practicing. I've practiced in a lot of different ways. As part of This Is Bracket Racing Elite, I've learned a lot of really unique and interesting practice tree exercises so that you're not just sitting there just hammering away on the button over and over again, because that gets boring after a while. So I've found some really good ways to kind of liven the whole practicing thing up a little bit, and some tricks. But like I was saying, it's important to make sure that you're using good technique, because when you get to a certain point in your practicing routines, or at least I have found that I tend to want to focus more on my mechanics, how I'm letting go of the button. And I'm a top bulb racer. So, there's the window, I think, is a little bit smaller when you're talking about consistency with top bulb racing than it is with bottom bulb racing. Although there are people who are just as good on the bottom bulb as the world on the top, like Nick Hastings. So it's really important.
Eric, just not to interrupt you, but could you explain, just for those who don't know, what the difference is between that, a top bulb racer or bottom bulb?
Okay, so like your classes, I race IHRA. So at my track, there's top ET and modified. At Maple Grove, where you guys would be racing or be spectating at, there's Super Pro and Pro. Those are the two faster classes. Super Pro uses a delay box, and a trans brake button. When they see the top bulb come on, they're letting go of the trans brake button, and the delay box, it has a set amount of time in it that basically the car will sit there and hold for that amount of time before it launches. It'll sit on the two-step. In Pro, just recently, I guess, Division 1 has changed to a trans brake button. So you're allowed to use a trans brake button, but you cannot use a delay box. So you have to wait until the bottom bulb comes on to let go of the trans brake, and then you have no delay box. Basically, as soon as you let go of that trans brake, the car is going to move. So they do have buttons that are slow release buttons that have a real long throw on them. So when you let go of them, it takes a lot longer for the actual mechanism to release at the button. So that's sort of like a delay box of sorts. But there's also other ways to slow your car down and pick it up as well. So when I'm practicing, I am not so much focused on what my reaction times are directly, like what the numbers are. I'm trying to be consistent. And there's a couple ways that I measure that. The first one is obviously the spread, which is the range from your best or your fastest reaction time to your slowest reaction time. I am an industrial engineer, so I've taken a lot of stats classes. So I understand a lot of statistics and how that can play a role. And one of the things that I really pay attention to that I don't know that a lot of people are paying attention to is standard deviation and variance. So if you look at your average and you look at your range, that's what most people are looking at. So they're trying to get the closest to perfect average with the smallest amount of spread or range, which is your fastest to your slowest. I'm looking at your standard deviation and your variance, which takes that a step further. Your standard deviation is the average amount that over all of your lights that you deviate from the average of all of your lights. So let's say you're 005, 006, 004. Within there, you're obviously your average is going to be the 005, but your standard deviation is going to be 1 because give or take. There's a real complicated math formula that works it out, but it's really easy with Excel. So I have created a spreadsheet, and I will show that to you.
Perfect. And Eric, just a quick question, and before we get into the Excel, you talk about you look at your consistency when you're practicing instead of just trying to cut the best light every single time.
Yep.
Is there a frequency in which you practice, or like you don't over practice?
Yeah. So there's different schools of thought. So I used to sit when I was like 16, 17, I used to sit in front of the practice tree for like an hour and just do 100 runs, just boom, 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 boom. There is something to gain from that, and that's like stamina and endurance. You definitely want that, because when you're sitting in a 100-degree race car with 15 layers of fire suit on, you want to be able to have that stamina, but you obviously also want to be able to re-find your spot and have that muscle memory. So after you hit the tree so many times, the practice tree so many times, you're going to lose the repetition is going to take over. The muscle memory is going to take over. You're going to get used to how quickly that the tree turns on. And that brings up a good point. I practice with a Porta-Tree Eliminator, which is like the newest tree out. I started practicing with a Biondo final round, and there's obviously the final round is older. The one I had ending, it didn't have LED lights in it. So it wasn't as accurate. The thing I did like about the Biondo practice tree, though, was that it wasn't a set amount of time from stage to the tree starting. So with the Porta-Tree, the one thing I really don't like about the Porta-Tree is that when you hit the button and you activate the stage on a Porta-Tree practice tree, it is going to activate that top bulb the same every time, no matter if you can set it to change that setting, but it's not random. You can't set it random. The Biondo was always random. So if I was hitting the Biondo practice tree 100 runs in a row, I would get one where it'd be like a super long tree. And that means that from stage to when that first amber light comes on, it's a super long period of time, or at least it feels like it. When you're looking at the timing, it's not really that much more, but when you're holding the button and you did 50 runs before that and it was all a certain time, and then all of a sudden it's super long, you're going to want to flinch off, and it's going to, you're going to have a terrible reaction time. And on the flip side, you can also get a super quick one, and that's super frustrating as well. But you want to get frustrated when you're practicing, because that's when you're testing yourself and you're trying to prepare yourself for everything. I don't know if this is true, but I've heard rumors that Peter Biondo says to have the TV on while you're practicing so that there's something in the background. I can't do that. For me, that's just not realistic, and I'm easily distracted, I guess. I don't know. I don't get much out of practicing like that because I get frustrated when if I'm practicing, I'm trying to have a really tight spread and a really small standard deviation. And if I mess that up, I I get pissed because it's like a bat. I ruined my group. So yeah, that's what's important about, that. And the porta tree obviously is a great practice tree, but that's the one thing that I find frustrating about it, because I miss having that sort of distraction, I guess.
And one more question, sorry, before the Excel.
No worries.
Do you find yourself, like, I know I used to do this and I still do it, and I think if I found it helpful, if I could talk, helpful for me, is sometimes I visualize it as if I'm on a race day, and I'll do 2 practice hits, and then I try to be, then I mentally prepare for first round, and I pretend I'm in first round of eliminations, try to be below whatever light I want to be below. I mean, do you find value in that as well, and like to see how your body reacts to that?
Hold that thought, because I have a great exercise for that. So let me show you the practice sheet that I use, because I use this for every exercise no matter what I do. Let me show you this first, and then I'll get into the individual exercises of some of that kind of stuff and how to simulate that.
Yeah, and for those listening on the audio, you can check the visual of this out on our YouTube.
Yep. Yeah. And I'll try to speak through this too, so that it makes sense for people listening too. So on my Facebook page, the EP Motorsports Facebook page, search EP Motorsports or Peterka Motorsports on Facebook. When you come to that Facebook page, you'll see a use app button, and you'll click on that, and it will pull up a Google Doc that is a spreadsheet, and it's an Excel sheet. You're going to want to download that. Don't worry, I'm not putting a virus on your computer. It's just a simple Excel macro to log your practice runs. But what that does is it'll take you to an instructional sheet. Once you open that file, it'll take you to the EP Motorsports practice tree log. And it has some instructions here. Log each reaction time for your first set in a certain column. And then you'll see that there's I have 3 different columns basically to break your practice up. So if you want to do, a lot of times I'll do like 3 or 10 hits in the morning, put them in the first column, then 10 hits in the middle of the day, put them in the second column, 10 hits at night, put them in the third column. But basically you'll hit this button, today's practice log. And what this will do is it'll add a sheet on the end, which is not working for me right now, but it'll basically add a new sheet all the way at the end, and you'll be able to log your runs or log your practice hits in the spreadsheet. And once you log your practice hits in the spreadsheet, it'll compile the number of 00 lights you had, the number of teen lights you had, anything later than teen, 20 and above, I call late, all your reds, your average, what your spread is. So we talked about that. That's what most people are looking at, but then it tells you your standard deviation, and you want to get that number as low as possible. And then it also has a set of columns for your overall summary. So this is a good way to track your progress, because every time you hit that today's practice log button, it adds another sheet at the end. So you can basically log forever your practices, and you can look back if you want and see how you improved. I wanted to add a feature that graphed it through all the sheets, but I'm not that good at Excel, so I couldn't figure it out. So if anybody knows how to do that, that'd be awesome, because that's originally what I had planned to do with this file, was to have this part, but then also be able to track how good you got. So basically, you'd see your standard deviation over all the days that you practiced go down. But basically, like I said, all you do is you log all your runs. Like here, you can see I was practicing. Obviously, I was set up extremely aggressive here. I think that I was doing an exercise, and I don't remember what it's called, but basically what you're trying to do is see how many, you take 10 hits and you see how many hits you can do better than 008. And it's difficult. It takes a lot of focus to be that 008 and better every time in 10 hits. So this is one of those examples of that exercise. But going to your point, Zach, one of those exercises that you spoke about, which was trying to simulate first round, second round, or facing certain opponents. So what you want to do is, and Luke Bogacki taught me this one, so I can't take credit for this, but you take some note cards or just quarter sheets of paper, And in this case, I have 4. What you would normally want to do is you'd want to do 8 to 10 to simulate an 8 to 10 round race. And what you're going to do is you're going to write on one side, you're going to write names of opponents. So, Peter Biondo, Kenny Underwood, Jeff Serra, Anthony Lucci. And then you're going to flip them over and you're going to shuffle them up. And then after you shuffle them up, you're going to take them without flipping them over, and you're going to write reaction times on there. And normally what I would do is I would go, if I had 10, I would go from 012 and then just start counting down. So 012, and then on the next one, 011, on the next one, 010. And then when you're done and you have all those, you shuffle them up again, you flip them back over to the name side, and then you take your time runs on your practice tree. So you take 2 time runs, and then you'll start pulling cards. So for example, I take my 2 time runs, I make my adjustments to my delay box, and then I pull a card and it's Peter Biondo. Okay, so when I do that, I'm imagining in my mind that I'm lining up next to Peter Biondo, and I'm trying to visualize that, think about what he might be dialed, and then you hit the practice tree, and it kind of prepares you for that you try to prepare for that moment, because that moment's going to come. And most likely, if you're racing Peter Biondo, you're at a big race, or if you're racing Jeff Serra, you're at a big race. So you need to prepare yourself mentally and basically make it so that you have been in that situation before you're in that situation, because that's going to be really challenging, obviously mentally, for a lot of people to line up next to somebody like that. But at least if you're practicing that and thinking about, okay, this is what I would do in that moment, it gives you that kind of experience already before it actually happens. So that's one exercise that I found really useful, that I would have never thought of on my own.
And Eric, is that reaction time that's written on the backside of the card, that is your competitor's reaction time?
Yeah. Yep. So basically you would hit the tree. So first round, Jeff Serra, you hit the tree, whatever it is, you flip the card over, and let's say you wrote 010 on that sheet and you were 005. So now you take Jeff Serra's card and throw that in the trash. And then you go to the next one, you hit the tree and flip it over until there's no cards left or you lost. And that kind of simulates going through. That's the best way I've found to simulate going through a race.
That's great, because it really puts when you line up against someone, you try to not let it affect you, but your body has a natural response to whether it's stress or adrenaline or whatever. So I think that's a great way it really is a great way to prepare for that moment.
Yep. Yeah, that's the best way I found. I'm trying to think so we used to have one of the things that you can do also to simulate being in a race, and I haven't done it, but I've heard really good things about the Corona lockdown practice tree challenge, or whatever it's called on Facebook. You can search it on Facebook. It's Corona lockdown practice tree. It's basically practice tree races that they have. And it's a couple guys from your area that put it on, but I've heard really good things. It's like $7 to enter, Top Bulb or something like that. And they even have a points program. So, they do it live on Facebook so that you can't cheat. At least I don't know a way of cheating. But you go in, you log your runs, you take a video of you hitting the practice tree. And then they go through on their own time. I don't know how they have this much time, but they go through and watch everybody's video and basically put everybody on a ladder. And then they watch everybody's video and see, whoever has the best light of that particular run that they pick, that person advances. And then they go and just go through the ladder, and whoever wins the money and wins the points. And then at the end of the season, they award a point season winner and give away a bunch of prizes. I know that there's entries to big money races given away, and it's a really good program. And they would be really great guys to have on the show too, actually, to kind of elaborate on it. Cause like I said, I've never done it, but I've heard really good things about it.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great way it's virtual, it's a virtual competition. So, and in today's world, I mean, that's perfect. I couldn't agree more.
For sure. So one of the other things that I wanted to talk about was that sometimes, you know, there's a school of thought that you have to be in the car to practice good. I know that some guys that are really intense say that, you know, you want to practice inside the car. I don't have a heated garage, so I'm not sitting out in my car in December or January in Michigan. But I haven't really found that to be super useful. I guess if you don't get to race a bunch and you want to, or you're just starting out and you want to really nail down your routine, but with that, you have to make sure if you're going to go and do that, you got to put all your stuff on. You have to, you know, shift the car like you're doing the whole routine. It's a really good way to get used to, you know, doing your whole starting line thing. And, you know, you could even go as far as like pumping the brake, like you're staging, to kind of get used to it. I've done it a few times, but I don't really do it all the time. But like I said, if you're not used to the car, used to racing, or you're just starting out, that's probably a really good idea to practice that way, to kind of simulate seat time.
Yeah, I echo that. I don't have a heated garage, so in this area it wouldn't be too fun. But I you know, now that you say that, I do remember putting my helmet on and practicing that way, but not recently. But when I was younger, I used to do it. So I mean, it's amazing how many different techniques there are, you know, and it's interesting.
Yeah. One of the other ones is you know, one thing that Luke had us do in Elite, during the winter, we do a lot of practice tree stuff. And one of the things that he had us do was wake up, hit the tree in the morning, and then come home from work and hit the tree with the same delay, and see how much your reaction times change. I noticed during that exercise that the light in the room actually changed my reaction time a lot more. If you have a lot of natural light coming in the morning here in Michigan, it's still dark when I leave for work. So if I'm hitting the tree, I'm using the lights in the room. And then, you know, in the afternoon after I get home, it's sunny most of the time, or at least a lot brighter when you have windows. So that will affect, I think that affected the tree more than anything else. But there is something to be said about, you know, your mental exhaustion or state of mind, stress level in the morning compared to the afternoon, you know, mental fatigue, that type of thing. There is something to be said for that, for sure. So good exercise, something to pay attention to if you're interested in trying to figure that out as well.
And is there you mentioned mental fatigue, and obviously, you know, the temperature changes throughout the day. It's hot or it's cold, daylight, your own personal exhaustion. Like you said, 8 to 10 round races. You might start at 8 in the morning and you might end at, you know, 1 a.m. the next day. Do you have any like tips or anything that you do to kind of combat that? Is it something that's just staying hydrated, eating, or not eat, or, you know?
Yeah, I can't not eat. Yeah. So there's a lot of really good racers that don't eat, and that will not eat. I know that Scotty Richardson won't eat. I know that Brian Source will not eat. I've watched Brian Source not eat and thought, man, you are crazy for not eating. I get lightheaded in the car, especially if it's hot. And, you know, I find that to be more of a detriment to me than an advantage. Now, you don't want to, it would be interesting to see. Now, I've unfortunately tested this in the car. I don't have to test it on the practice tree, but I've eaten like a cheeseburger before a round. And, you know, if you're not eating food that's good for you and you're eating something like that, you're going to have a problem, I think. At least I do. It makes me lethargic. So if I'm at the track, I'm trying to eat something healthy. Like I eat like veggies, or like try to eat healthy snacks, fruits, veggies. Those are the kind of things that I go for. I see Chubbs is paying us a visit in the background here. So yeah, so like veggies, hummus is really good track snack. You know, try to pay attention to stuff that's healthy. And I think that if you practice, you'll probably see that same change. You know, if it's happening in the car, it's going to happen on the practice tree for sure. It's just going to be, I think it's probably going to be magnified in the car with the heat, with the pressure, the stress, anxiety, adrenaline, all that stuff's just going to get magnified. So whatever you notice changes you on your practice tree, you definitely need to make sure that you're not doing it at the racetrack.
Yeah, you don't want to be eating a bag of potato chips and 2 Diet Cokes.
Yeah, exactly. I do drink an energy drink at the track a lot of times. It's more superstition, I think, than anything else. Bang Energy is like I have to have one while I'm at the racetrack. I just did good one day while I was drinking one, so now I have to have one every time.
Now, I guess, Eric, on that, are you a coffee drinker?
Oh yeah, probably way more than I should be, and that probably isn't a good thing for me in the car, because there's no way I drink as much caffeine on race day as I do during the week. So it's something to think about for sure. I mean, all this stuff you're putting in your body is definitely going to affect your mental state and your physical state. And, you don't see NASCAR drivers, smoking a cigarette on pace laps anymore. I mean, you probably did it one time, but you don't anymore.
And people say racers aren't athletes. I mean, and also I think you add to it, you pay attention to what you're putting in your body, but I think, not saying that you need to be in a Marine in fighting shape, but I think it's also important to probably exercise semi-regularly, to keep your heart rate more stable in pressure situations. And the heat won't bother you as much, right? I mean,
I think that's the biggest thing, cardio. Like I said, I get lightheaded in the car sometimes, and I think that a lot of that type of thing could be alleviated a lot with physical fitness. And I used to be in the gym all the time a couple of years ago. I've gotten really busy now, so I don't have as much time for it. But I definitely notice a difference in the summer when it's 110 degrees out. And how hot it gets inside, especially a door car, man. I don't know how door car guys do it sometimes.
Yeah. And not speaking for Billy, but Billy Boyko, we talked a couple of weeks ago, and he's running top bulb dragster in media, and he even said the same thing. I mean, he used to play football, so he worked out all the time, and then after a while he didn't as much, and he said he runs a mile every day of the week, and just a mile, that's it. And he noticed a significant difference in his focus and his consistency with his reaction times.
Yep. Yeah, I can believe that. That dude's a machine. He's definitely, he didn't race as much as some people, but Billy's an awesome racer.
Oh yeah. So Lucci, now you got some tricks for your Jags practice tree app.
Yeah, seriously. So there's a lot more to it than just using the Jags app on your phone.
So let's talk about the Jags app, right? I haven't used it that much, but the times I have used it, it seems like I'm either 001 or 016. There's not really much in between. Do you notice that, Anthony?
Yeah, I mean, I notice it's and it's you brought up a lot of great points tonight, which I didn't even think about before. One, I think the big thing being the random staging, right? Which you don't get with an app like that. So, and I was actually saying this to Zach the other week. I was like, do you count down when the lights are dropping 1, 2, 3, 4? And Zach's like, no, I just stare at the bottom bulb.
Yep.
And I've done that too. And sometimes I guess it just seems like as soon as that third yellow comes on, if you release, you're definitely going to red light. So you have to almost anticipate when that bulb has to be fully lit, and then okay, it's the green's going to come on, but it's not on yet to cut the best light. But kind of to your point, that might not be the best way to think about it when you're at home. Yeah, because when you're at the track, right, that's not how it's going to be. No.
So on that note, if I were giving Anthony advice right now, and Zach, I think you'll agree with this. When I was in juniors, one of the most important things I ever did was, as a family, working on the car, we recognized that we couldn't expect me to change how I reacted to get a good and consistent light. We needed to make the car react differently in order to achieve the light. So you you personally, Anthony has Anthony's spot on the tree, especially bottom bulb. That there's a big difference between bottom bulb and top bulb in that regard. And you, if Zach hops in Anthony's car and Anthony's car is set up for Anthony's spot, Zach is probably more than likely going to not be very good on the tree, either really early or really late. So it's important. That's why in the very beginning of all this, I mentioned that I don't care what I have a lot of tools in my car and on the practice tree to change what the number is. But really, when I'm practicing, I don't care what the number is. I care how close the numbers are together, because if the numbers are really close together, that means that I can adjust the car into where I want that pocket of numbers to be. So let's talk about the range. And I did show I had the spreadsheet up earlier and showing how that works. But I think probably most of the people listen to the podcast anyway, so I don't think I need to bring it up again. But what I shoot for normally in standard deviation, if my standard deviation I've found is like 3 thou, that is like really good. Like if I'm under 3 thou standard deviation, I'm normally like, that would be like my best day ever at the racetrack on reaction times. A bad one would be like 7. So the difference between standard deviation and spread is that when you're just looking at spread, anybody can have a 30 light. It happens when you're practicing, especially because, you saw my cat walking around here. My cat jumps on everything. So if I'm practicing and my cat jumps on something or falls or knocks something over, I'm going to have like a 40 or 50 reaction time. The standard deviation kind of, in a way, ignores that, kind of gives you grace on that. And you can still have a bigger spread, but still have a smaller standard deviation, if that makes sense. So like it's your average deviation from what your average value is. I hope does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes complete sense.
So
yeah.
So that's why it's really important to pay attention to, because when you're at a race and you're setting up your belay box, in my case, the standard deviation is really going to tell me, it's going to throw out the outliers where something stupid happens, and it's really going to tell me where I can set up. So if I use standard deviation on a big money weekend, let's say, if my standard deviation is 4, I'm comfortable setting up 6, 5, 6 on the tree. I'm going to have that, 1 or 2 lights that's outside that standard deviation. But if my standard deviation is 3 or 4, I can set up really tight, and that's really good. If I was just looking at my spread, then I have a little bit more trouble, being comfortable there, and it takes away that confidence. So I think it's important to use standard deviation, because you're not letting one weird reaction time completely ruin your whole approach. The only problem with standard deviation is you probably need a little bit bigger sample size. So like if you're racing a 1-day event, until you get to the 4th or 5th round, you're not going to have enough hits to really be able to use it that much. But like I said, if you're at a 5-day event or something and you go a lot of rounds every day, it's a really good tool, because you can really dial everything in and get the fine adjustment and take 1 or 2 out of the box rather than 5 or 6.
So I guess, Eric, on that, talking about on race day, what do you typically do? Like this spreadsheet that you've graciously given us all access to, do you update that while you're at the track, or do you wait until like the end of the day and then kind of digest all that information and enter that?
I
don't. Is that strictly for practice?
I don't. I use it mostly for practice. However, if I have a large enough sample of data, which would be, like I said, a multi-day event, it would definitely be a good tool to use. And at the end of the year, it's a great tool to use, or halfway through the season to assess where you're at, it's a great tool to use. Maybe even your first month of the season. Let's say I decide I'm going to set up 8 at a normal weekly bracket race, 8 or 9. I can go through and assess all my reaction times for, the first 4 weeks of racing and kind of see where I'm at. And if I have good numbers, good standard deviation, small standard deviation, maybe I need to reevaluate my strategy and set up a little tighter, because I can get away with it. That's just sort of the way I use it. You have to have a bigger set of data though. You can't just use one day. 2 time runs in first round is not going to tell you much.
Right.
You kind of got to know what you're doing for that, but you can really assess large chunks of data really well with this, better than just using the overall range of reaction times.
I think that's extremely valuable, everything you said about the standard deviation, because I know, especially for a young racer, because I mean, when you race juniors, Eric, when I race juniors, like you want to be killer every time. So when you're practicing, and if you weren't killer on the practice tree, you get frustrated and kind of get in your own head a little bit. So looking at it a little bit differently in a standard deviation focus instead of your range, like you said, it brings a lot to light. And I think it would be a huge peace of mind for a lot of younger racers too, and no matter what age, but especially younger.
Yep. Let's talk about buttons. So, a lot of, when you buy a porta tree, you get this button, and this button is not very good. I don't have a micro switch here that I would use in the car, like a Biondo 00 button or anything like that. But, that would be a really good button to use. But you notice I don't have a different button than this one. And that is because I want to make my practice difficult. So this button is super sensitive to everything. It's sensitive to how you hold it. It's sensitive to so when I practice, I like to have it kind of up against something so that when I'm putting pressure on the button, it's, I'm pushing against something just like a steering wheel. At a practice tree race, you're just holding it. So there's different techniques that you need to use depending on what the situation is. But I use this button because it varies a lot. I actually, in my junior dragster days, bought a porta tree and sent it back because I hated the button so much. But when I bought this one, I knew what I was getting myself into, and I realized that, making practice challenging is not necessarily a bad thing. And it makes you super sensitive to mechanics. And when you're top bulb racing and you're let go of a button and you're trying to be able to set up 5 instead of 9, mechanics is absolutely everything. How you let go of the button, how your posture when you're on the button. That's one of the main things that I think I kind of had a breakthrough on this past year with reaction times. Was I did a couple things to the car, but one of the main things I think I did for me was I recognized that I was really tensing up. And when I would tense up, I would let go of the button really weird. Like I'd throw my shoulder back sometimes. And all of a sudden I'd be 25 instead of 00, but I'd feel 00. And that motion of doing this instead of just doing this is what was causing it. So really, obviously you need to bring that into your practice routine as well. If you're a driver who likes to be super intense all the time, like there's some people I know that scream in their car to get themselves pumped up. You want to make sure that you're pumped up when you practice. And I just don't know that that's what I realized was I used to be like that. I used to want to be super amped up and super, adrenaline. And what I noticed was when I was practicing, I'm not like that. I'm relaxed. I'm sitting here drinking a beer, drinking a cup of coffee in the morning, whatever, just kind of hitting the tree, and I'm super relaxed. So what I did this year is I tried to approach every round differently. Where I used to approach every round like the final round, now I approach every round like a time run. And I think that helped me a lot. Mentally, telling myself that it was a time run really helped my physically, kind of let go and all my mechanics be the same as when I was practicing. And I think that made me a lot more consistent.
Yeah, it's amazing how much, the mental aspect of all this, and to echo that, I don't know if you saw the Luke and Peter Biondo's Facebook video or recording they did about a couple of weeks ago. And it was all about that, talking to yourself in the car, if that works for you, or if it doesn't, whatever, and how you approach each specific round, your focus on the starting line, and just the entire, how you talk to yourself kind of in your head and how it affects you at the starting line.
Yeah. When I first joined Elite, I was in a session with Luke, and I said, I they were talking about approaching every run like a time run. And I said, well, I don't do that. I approach every run like the final round, because when I get to the final round, I want that to be just like all the other rounds. I think it's a lot harder to make the final round feel like a time run than it is to make the time run feel like the final round. When I said that to Justin Lamb a couple years ago, or a couple years after that, he was like, he couldn't believe that was the approach that I was taking. So I kind of opened myself up to a different perspective this year and changed the strategy. And, I think it worked, but I also think that a lot of times just kind of making small changes here and there after a while definitely helps too, because if you're doing the same thing over and over again, it's hard to get your body to, you get that weird one once in a while. There's guys that'll let go with the left hand. If they're having a really bad day or a really bad weekend, they'll switch to letting go with the left just to change something to try and bring themselves around. So it's crazy. We're letting go of a damn button. And like, there's other people that are hitting a pedal, but most of us are just letting go of a button, and there's so much that goes into it. It's crazy. It's crazy how much we drive ourselves crazy thinking about how we're going to let go of a button.
Yeah, and that's a good point you just brought up. Actually, Zach and I were talking about that a couple of weeks ago too, that when you are doing for foot brake racers, right, it's a little bit different, right? Because you're going to practice with your hand on like a porta tree or on your phone, whatever it might be. But Zach brought up a great point to me. He's like, well, your reaction time probably from your eyes to your hand is probably a little bit quicker than your eyes to your foot, because your foot's a lot further away from your brain.
Yeah, for sure. And the thing about that is, I always tried, if I was so when I was racing juniors, I always practiced with a pedal. Mm-hmm. For that very reason, because you can practice with a button, obviously, but practicing with a pedal is obviously a lot more accurate, and you want to make it as real as possible. You definitely want to use the right muscles. So if you're reacting with your foot, you want to practice with your foot, because if you're practicing with your hand, you're getting your eye, and you're getting the input and the reaction to the input, but you're not getting the accuracy of the output that you're providing to the practice tree or to your car in that case. And that's obviously going to present some challenges and not make you as consistent as you probably could be.
Yeah, and I remember, growing up, we had I don't sound like an old person growing up, like we made and I'm sure that porta tree or someone else makes it, but we made like a little bracket that the pedal would sit like as if it was the angle of your pedal in a junior dragster, for example. Yep. And like you said, it comes down to muscle memory a little, in a sense. You want to work the right muscles. So
yeah, and there's guys that have simulators, just like your iRacing stuff. They sit in them, and they have a steering wheel with the right kind of buttons on it, like micro switch style buttons, and the practice tree in front of them, or a full sized or a porta tree mini that's kind of like a half size with real LED bulbs in it. And they'll sit there in that and take reps on that. And it's just trying to make it more realistic and more like you're in the car. But at a certain point, you're never going to make it as real as it being 100 degrees out. The sweat's coming down your forehead in your helmet, and you're just hot as hell and lightheaded. That's really hard to simulate, and those are the moments that you really need to prepare for, because that's when you need to be at the very, very top of your game.
Yeah, and I think focusing on your breathing also at that same point, is a big part, right? Like, I know for me, and I still do it just unconsciously, is I always take like slow, try to take nice calm breaths, and like kind of as the lights are coming down, I'm kind of breathing out and just focusing. Everyone has their own technique, but
I have a hilarious story about that.
Let's hear it.
I went to Roy Hill's drag racing school when I was, so I want to say 12 or 13. I think it was 13 actually. And we would hit the pro tree, and we would just, in the junior dragster, we'd hit the pro tree, stop right away, pull the car back, do it again. pull the car back, do it again. And he just wanted to see how we were reacting. And before we went out in the classroom, what we did is, the slap game where one person holds their hands like this, the other person holds their hands like this, and the underneath person tries to slap the other person's hands. He was doing that with us. So he's trying to get us to, there's a certain amount of quickness that is in you that you don't just get when you're just hanging out, just chilling. You need to really focus on reacting as quickly as possible. And he was trying to get that out of us. So when he put us on the pro tree, he wanted to see that same thing. One thing he focused on was breathing. And he said, you need to get the oxygen into your brain. And have you ever met Roy Hill before, Zach?
I have not.
That dude is intense. He is intense. And he's yelling and screaming up on the starting line. You're not breathing. You need to breathe, kid. And so I'm finally, it gets to the point where like, I can't do any better. I feel like a piece of crap. Like I'm not doing what he wants me to do, but I'm breathing. So he wanted us to breathe in while we're pre-staging and hold your breath. Basically hold that oxygen in his idea was holding it in your brain. Obviously that's not what's happening. We're all smarter than that, but that's the idea. But I think that he just wanted you to slow your breathing down, slow your heart rate down. When I hold my breath, I feel like my heart rate goes up. So I breathe kind of consistently now. But he was so adamant that I was not breathing that he put me in the ambulance at the racetrack and gave me oxygen. I was mortified.
You're like, all right, I'll breathe.
So it turns out that the car was broken. The post on the clutch, the primary clutch was broke. And that was the whole reason that the car was not reacting the way it was supposed to. It was not me, but it took like a half an hour of torture for him to finally realize that it was not me.
Jeez. But hey, it gets you thinking.
It was crazy.
Yeah, well, like you said, Eric, there's a lot of different things that go into it, and you went over a bunch of different great tips for all racers out there of all different levels that you can apply to your practicing and on the racetrack. Make sure everyone that's listening, go find Eric's Excel file on his Facebook page. And Eric, I believe that's at EP Motorsports. Do you want to tell everyone that's listening?
Yeah, it's at EP Motorsports was taken on Facebook. So it's at Peterka Motorsports on Facebook. But I'm pretty sure that if you search EP Motorsports, it'll still come up. You'll see you'll see my page and you'll be able to get to it. It's a button right at the top of the Facebook page.
Awesome. And then you're on Instagram as well, right?
Yeah, EP_Motorsports on Instagram.
Nice.
I also have kind of like a side project that I started. It's called Hitters Row. It's on Instagram. I haven't posted in a while. Been really busy, but I wanted to try and kind of highlight some local talent and some racers we don't hear of all the time, but have, kind of excelled on a larger stage. It's not to try and compete with anything like Drag Champ or anything like that. I'm just kind of like posting cool stuff. If I see a funny meme or something, I post on there. So check that out as well. After I graduate grad school in July, so I'm planning on, that sort of getting a little bit more intense after that, focusing a little bit more on that as like a side project and stuff. So you can check that out as well. It's Hitters Row on Instagram.
That's awesome. That sounds like a cool page to follow.
Yep.
Nice. Well, Eric, can't thank you enough for joining us on this episode of Motoring Millennials, and a ton of great insight. So thanks for all that. And like I said earlier, for sharing that Excel file. And I think we're all going to be digging into that for the next couple weeks and years, probably.
Yeah. Like I said, if anybody knows how to improve on it, definitely let me know. I'd be interested in figuring out, getting some feedback on it and figuring out ways to improve on it. Cause like Zach said, I'm pretty intense when it comes to practicing. I used to post a lot of stuff about practicing kind of results and stuff. And it's definitely, I try to find new ways that people haven't thought of to try and get any edge I can on the competition.
It's definitely paid off.
Yeah, it makes a difference. Awesome.
So.
Well, anyone listening to this episode of Motoring Millennials, you can go back and watch it if you're not watching this on YouTube already. You can find us at Motoring Millennials on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. And you can always check out our apparel line at motoringmillennials.com. And as always, we'll catch you on the next one. Keep on motoring.